The snow had already started falling in thick, relentless sheets when Anna Valentine first heard the horses coming hard across the frozen ground, and she knew in her bones that they were coming for her. She had been living in the small mining camp outside Keeler, California, for 3 months now, ever since her father died in a collapse at the silver mine and left her with nothing but his debts and his enemies. The Sierra Nevada mountains loomed over the eastern edge of town, and when winter storms blew in from the high peaks, they came with a vengeance that could bury a person alive. This was one of those storms, the kind that old-timers talked about for years afterward, the kind that killed the unprepared and the unlucky. Anna stood at the window of the tiny shack she called home, her breath fogging the glass as she peered into the white chaos outside. She could barely see 10 feet beyond her door, but she could hear them now, the shouting voices carried on the howling wind. 8 men. She counted them as they materialized out of the blizzard like vengeful ghosts. They were the Garrett brothers and their hired guns, come to collect on her father's debt the only way they knew how. Her father had borrowed money from Samuel Garrett to invest in a mining claim that never paid out. When he died, Garrett decided that Anna would settle the debt one way or another. She had refused his proposal of marriage, refused to work in his saloon, refused every degrading offer he made. Now he was done asking. Anna grabbed her father's old Colt revolver from the table, checked that it was loaded, and threw on her heavy wool coat. She could not fight 8 men, and she could not reason with them. Her only chance was to run, to disappear into the blizzard and hope they could not follow. It was a desperate gamble. People died in storms like this, frozen solid and not found until spring thaw. But the alternative was worse than death. She slipped out the back door just as the first man kicked in the front. The cold hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath and making her eyes water instantly. The wind shrieked around her, and snow pelted her face hard enough to sting. She could not see where she was going, could only stumble forward with her arms outstretched, praying she was heading toward the rocky foothills rather than off a cliff behind her. She heard shouting, heard them discover the empty shack and spread out to search. Their voices faded in and out on the wind, sometimes seeming right behind her, sometimes impossibly distant. She kept moving, her legs burning with effort as she pushed through snow that was already knee-deep in places. Anna had no idea how long she walked. Time became meaningless in the white void. Her fingers and toes went numb first, then her face, then everything else. She fell twice, struggled back to her feet both times through sheer stubborn will. The second time she fell, she saw something through the swirling snow, a dark shape that resolved into a small cabin built against a rocky outcropping. She nearly sobbed with relief. It might be abandoned, might offer no real shelter, but it was something. She stumbled toward it, nearly fell against the door, and pounded on the rough wood with her frozen fists. The door opened immediately, and a man stood silhouetted against the warm glow of a fire inside. He was tall and lean, with dark hair and eyes that assessed her situation in a single glance. Without a word, he pulled her inside and shut the door against the storm. "Thank you," Anna managed through chattering teeth. "Thank you. I did not know if anyone lived up here." "Not many do," the man said. His voice was quiet, measured, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas or Oklahoma. "Get by that fire before you lose something to frostbite." Anna did not need to be told twice. She moved to the stone fireplace and held her trembling hands toward the flames. The man draped a heavy blanket around her shoulders and pressed a tin cup of hot coffee into her hands. She wrapped her fingers around it gratefully, feeling the warmth begin to seep back into her frozen flesh. "I am Anna," she said. "Anna Valentine." "Lucas Zimmerman," he replied. He settled into a chair across from her and studied her with those careful, watchful eyes. "You are the girl from the mining camp, the one whose father died in the collapse. You know about that. I hear things. I come down to Keeler for supplies once a month or so." He paused, glanced toward the door where the wind was howling like a living thing. "What are you doing out in this storm? Trying to kill yourself?" "Men were after me," Anna said quietly. She met his gaze steadily. 8 of them. The Garrett brothers and their men. They came to collect on my father's debt. Something shifted in Lucas's expression, a hardening around his eyes and mouth. "Samuel Garrett. You know him." "I know of him. He owns half the town and wants to own the other half." Lucas stood and moved to the window, peering out into the storm. "If they are following your tracks, the snow will have covered them by now, but when the storm breaks, they will be looking." "I cannot go back," Anna said firmly. "I would rather freeze out here than let them take me." Lucas turned to look at her, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Then he nodded slowly. "Then you will stay here until we figure out what to do, but I should tell you, if 8 men come to my door looking for you, it is going to get complicated. I do not want you to put yourself at risk for me. You do not know me." "No," Lucas agreed. "But I know Samuel Garrett's type, and I do not much care for men who think they can take whatever they want just because they have money and guns." The storm raged for 3 days. Anna learned during that time that Lucas Zimmerman was a man of few words but steady presence. He had been a cowboy, worked cattle drives from Texas up to Montana, saved his money, and bought this piece of land in the Sierra foothills. He raised a small herd of hardy mountain cattle and trapped during the winter. He lived alone by choice, though Anna suspected there was more to that story than he was willing to share. She also learned that despite his quiet nature, he was observant and thoughtful. He noticed when she winced as feeling returned to her frost-nipped fingers and toes, made a salve from herbs and bear grease that eased the pain. He shared his simple meals without complaint, gave her his bed while he slept by the fire, treated her with a careful respect that she had not experienced from many men. On the second night, as they sat by the fire listening to the wind howl outside, Anna told him the whole story. How her father had been a good man, but a desperate one after her mother died. How he had borrowed from Garrett and gambled it on a worthless mining claim. How Garrett had come calling after the funeral with his obscene proposals, each one worse than the last. He said I could marry him, or I could work in his saloon serving drinks to minors. When I refused both, he said he would come and take me anyway, that he always collected his debts. Anna stared into the flames, her voice steady despite the memories. "So I waited, and when they came, I ran." Lucas was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "My father owed money to a man once, back in Texas before the war. The man came to collect, and when my father could not pay, the man took our land, our cattle, everything. My mother died that winter. No money for a doctor, no food, no heat. I was 14 years old." Anna looked at him and saw the old pain in his eyes, the kind that never really went away. "I am sorry. It taught me something," Lucas said. "Taught me that some men think money gives them the right to destroy lives. And it taught me that sometimes you have to stand up to those men, whatever the cost." On the third day, the storm finally broke. The world outside was transformed into a sparkling white wonderland, beautiful and deadly. The snow was 4 feet deep in places, and the temperature had dropped so low that the air itself seemed to crackle with cold. Lucas stood at the window for a long time, scanning the landscape. Then he turned to Anna and said, "They will come today or tomorrow. The snow will slow them down, but they will come. What should we do?" "We should finish this," Lucas said quietly. He moved to a wooden chest in the corner and opened it, revealing a gun belt and a well-maintained Winchester rifle. I have been running from men like Garrett my whole life, one way or another. I am tired of running. Anna felt her heart begin to pound. You cannot fight 8 men alone. I do not intend to fight them all, Lucas said. He checked the rifle, loaded it with smooth, practiced movements. I intend to make them reconsider whether you are worth the trouble. They came just after noon, when the sun was high and bright off the endless snow. Anna spotted them first, 8 dark figures struggling through the deep drifts on horseback. They were moving slowly, their horses laboring, but they were coming with grim determination. Lucas stepped outside, his rifle held loosely in his hands. Anna followed despite his order to stay inside. She would not hide while he faced danger on her behalf. The 8 men came to a halt about 50 yards from the cabin. Samuel Garrett himself was in the lead, a thick-bodied man with a cruel mouth and eyes like chips of ice. His brothers flanked him, and the others were hired guns, the kind of men who would do anything for money. That is far enough, Lucas called out, his voice carried clearly in the cold, still air. This is not your concern, Cowboy, Garrett shouted back. We are here for the girl. She owes me, and I mean to collect. She does not owe you anything. Her father's debts died with him. That is not how I do business. Garrett's hand moved toward his gun. Now step aside or we will go through you. You can try, Lucas said calmly, but here is how I see it. You are in deep snow on tired horses. I am on solid ground with a Winchester rifle and plenty of ammunition. How many of you do you think will make it back to Keeler? For a moment, nobody moved. The tension stretched tight as a wire. Anna could see the calculation in Garrett's eyes, weighing his pride against the odds. Then one of the hired guns, a scarred man on a gray horse, went for his pistol. Lucas's rifle came up in a smooth, fast motion, and he fired. The shot cracked across the snow like thunder, and the hired gun jerked backward out of his saddle, a bloom of red spreading across his chest. He fell into the snow and did not move. Chaos erupted. The horses spooked, plunging and rearing in the deep snow. 2 more men drew their guns, and Lucas fired twice more in rapid succession. Both men fell. The remaining hired guns were struggling to control their panicking horses, and one of them got his gun clear and fired wildly in Lucas's direction. The bullet went wide, and Lucas's return shot did not. The 4th man toppled into the snow. Enough. It was one of Garrett's brothers, his face pale with shock and fear. Samuel, this is madness. But Garrett himself had drawn his gun, his face twisted with rage. He fired at Lucas, and Anna screamed as the bullet kicked up splinters from the cabin wall behind them. Lucas levered another round into the chamber and fired, and Samuel Garrett swayed in his saddle, clutching his shoulder. Lucas fired again, and Garrett's horse went down, throwing its rider into the snow. Lucas worked the lever and fired a 5th shot, hitting the last hired gun who had finally gotten his weapon drawn. The man fell backward, disappeared into a drift of snow. The 3 remaining Garrett brothers sat frozen on their horses, staring at the carnage. 5 men dead or dying in the snow, and the cowboy with the rifle had not even broken a sweat. Samuel Garrett was crawling through the snow, trying to reach his gun, leaving a trail of blood behind him. Lucas walked forward through the snow until he stood over Garrett. He placed his boot on the man's outstretched hand, pinning it to the ground. Garrett looked up at him with hate and fear mingled in his eyes. "The debt is settled," Lucas said quietly. "And if you or any of your kin come near Anna Valentine again, I will not be so merciful next time. Do you understand me?" Garrett's mouth worked, but no sound came out. He managed a jerky nod. "Take him and go," Lucas said to the brothers. "And count yourselves lucky you are leaving at all." The three brothers dismounted and struggled through the snow to collect their wounded brother. They did not even look at the 5 dead men, just loaded Samuel onto a horse and turned back toward Keeler. They disappeared into the white landscape, and the silence that followed was profound. Anna stood in the snow beside Lucas, staring at the bodies. "They will come back," she said quietly. "They will bring the law or more guns or both." "Maybe," Lucas said. He looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Or maybe they will decide it is not worth it. Either way, you cannot go back to Keeler, not now." "Where will I go?" "Stay here," Lucas said. The words came out rough, almost tentative. "Stay with me, at least until spring, until we know if they are coming back." Anna looked at him, this quiet man who had risked everything to protect her from men he did not even know. She thought about the past 3 days, the easy companionship that had grown between them despite the circumstances. She thought about how he had looked at her across the fire, with something in his eyes that went deeper than simple kindness. "Yes," she said, "I will stay." The bodies froze solid before nightfall, and the next heavy snow buried them completely. When spring came, if anyone went looking, they would find 5 men who had gotten caught in the blizzard and died of exposure. That was the story, and it was close enough to the truth that nobody questioned it too hard. Samuel Garrett and his brothers left Keeler 3 weeks later, sold their holdings to a mining company out of San Francisco, and moved back east. Word filtered up to Lucas's cabin through the occasional traveler. People said that Garrett had lost his taste for California after several of his men disappeared in a blizzard. Nobody seemed particularly sorry to see him go. Anna stayed through the winter, and as the snow slowly melted and spring began to green the mountain meadows, she realized she had no desire to leave. Somewhere in the long, quiet months, she had fallen in love with Lucas Zimmerman. It had happened gradually, in small moments. The way he smiled when she made him laugh, a rare and precious thing. The way he listened when she talked about her parents, her childhood, her dreams. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not watching, with such open longing that it made her heart ache. She was not sure when he fell in love with her, but she thought maybe it had been there from the beginning, from the moment he opened his door and saw her standing in the storm. He was not a man who loved easily or lightly, but when he did, it was with his whole heart. They did not speak of it at first. Lucas was too cautious, too concerned about propriety and her reputation. But on a warm evening in April, when the meadows were full of wildflowers and the cattle were growing fat on spring grass, Anna took matters into her own hands. They were sitting outside the cabin, watching the sun set behind the mountains, and Anna simply took his hand. Lucas looked at her in surprise, and she saw the question in his eyes. "I am not leaving," she said quietly. "Not in spring, not ever, unless you want me to go." "I do not want you to go," Lucas said. His voice was rough with emotion. "Anna, I have been trying to figure out how to ask you to stay, how to tell you that I love you without making you feel obligated." "There is no obligation," Anna said. She moved closer to him, felt his arm come around her shoulders. "I love you, Lucas. I think I started loving you the night I showed up at your door half frozen and terrified, and you gave me shelter without asking for anything in return." Lucas turned to face her fully, and she saw everything she needed to see in his eyes. "I love you," he said again, as if saying it twice made it more real. "I want you to stay forever. I want to marry you, build a life with you." "Yes," Anna said simply, and when he kissed her, it felt like coming home. They were married a month later in a small church in a town called Lone Pine, about 20 miles south of Keeler. The preacher was an elderly man who asked no questions about their past, just smiled kindly and pronounced them husband and wife. They spent their wedding night in a hotel room with a real bed and clean sheets, and Anna discovered that Lucas Zimmerman, for all his quiet reserve, was a passionate and tender lover. They returned to the cabin in the mountains and began building their life together. Lucas expanded the cabin that summer, adding a proper bedroom and a larger kitchen. Anna started a garden, planted vegetables and herbs, and began raising chickens. They talked about buying more land, increasing the cattle herd, maybe building a proper ranch someday. The work was hard, but Anna had never been happier. She loved the rhythm of their days, the easy partnership they had developed. Lucas consulted her on every decision, valued her opinions and ideas. They worked side by side in the garden, in the pastures, in the cabin. At night, they would sit by the fire and talk for hours, or simply enjoy the comfortable silence that comes when two people are completely at ease with each other. In the fall, Anna realized she was pregnant. She told Lucas one evening after supper, watched his face transform with joy and wonder. He pulled her into his arms and held her so tightly she could barely breathe, murmuring promises and endearments against her hair. The winter was mild that year, for which Anna was grateful. Her pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Lucas fussed over her with an anxious devotion that was both touching and occasionally exasperating. He would not let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest frequently, and worried constantly about her health. "I am not made of glass," Anna told him one evening, laughing at his expression when he caught her carrying firewood. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am going to be fine." "I know," Lucas said, but the worry did not leave his eyes. "I just cannot help thinking about all the things that could go wrong." Anna took his face in her hands and kissed him gently. "Nothing is going to go wrong. We are going to have a beautiful, healthy baby, and we are going to raise him or her to be strong and kind and brave, just like you." Their son was born on a bright morning in late May, when the meadows were full of lupine and Indian paintbrush. The labor was long and difficult, but Anna was strong, and Lucas was there beside her the whole time, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and absolutely perfect, Lucas wept openly. They named him James after Anna's father. He was a good baby, healthy and alert, with his mother's dark curls and his father's steady gray eyes. Lucas was a devoted father, cradling his son with the same careful tenderness he showed Anna. He would sit for hours with James sleeping against his chest, one large hand cupping the baby's small head, a look of absolute wonder on his face. Anna would watch them together and feel her heart swell with so much love she thought it might burst. This man, this quiet cowboy who had risked everything to save her from a blizzard and the men who pursued her, had given her everything she had ever dreamed of and more. They had 2 more children over the next 6 years. A daughter they named Elizabeth, who had her father's quiet nature and her mother's fierce determination. And another son, Thomas, who was wild and adventurous from the day he learned to walk. The cabin had to be expanded twice more to accommodate their growing family, until it was a proper house with multiple bedrooms, a real parlor, and a kitchen large enough for Anna to work in comfortably. Lucas proved to be as good a rancher as he was a cowboy. The cattle herd grew steadily, and he became known throughout the region as an honest dealer and a skilled stockman. They bought more land, piece by piece, until they had a substantial ranch. Lucas hired a few hands to help with the work, carefully choosing men who were hardworking and trustworthy. Anna threw herself into making their ranch a real home. She sewed curtains for the windows, made quilts for the beds, filled the house with small touches that spoke of warmth and love. She maintained her garden, which grew larger every year, providing vegetables for the family and enough extra to sell in town. She learned to make butter and cheese, to preserve fruit, to do all the things required to keep a household running smoothly on an isolated mountain ranch. But more than the physical work, Anna focused on creating a home filled with love and laughter. She read to the children every night, taught them their letters and numbers, filled their heads with stories and dreams. Lucas taught them to ride, to work cattle, to understand the land and respect its power. Together, they raised their children to be strong, independent, and kind. The years passed in a blur of seasons and hard work and deep contentment. Lucas never spoke much about the day. He shot 5 men in the snow to protect Anna, but she knew he carried it with him. Sometimes she would wake in the night and find him standing at the window, staring out at the darkness, and she would go to him and wrap her arms around him and remind him without words that he had done what needed to be done. The children grew like weeds, as children do. James became tall and serious like his father, with a gift for understanding animals. Elizabeth was bright and curious, always asking questions and reading every book she could get her hands on. Thomas was the wild one, always getting into scrapes and adventures, keeping his parents perpetually concerned and occasionally exasperated. When James was 12, Elizabeth 10, and Thomas 6, a man rode up to the ranch one afternoon. He was elderly, with white hair and a weathered face, and he introduced himself as a retired U.S. Marshal. Anna felt her blood run cold, but Lucas simply invited the man inside and offered him coffee. "I am not here in any official capacity," the old marshal said, settling into a chair by the fire. "Truth is, I have been retired for 5 years now, but I was going through some old cases and I came across an interesting one from about 13 years back. 5 men died in a blizzard outside Keeler. All of them worked for Samuel Garrett." Lucas said nothing, just watched the marshal with steady eyes. Anna stood by the kitchen counter, her hands clenched in her apron. "The thing is," the marshal continued, "Samuel Garrett claimed those men were murdered by a cowboy living up in the hills, filed a formal complaint and everything. But when I investigated at the time, I could not find any evidence. No witnesses, no bodies until the spring thaw, and by then, well, they could have died of exposure just as easily as bullets. And Samuel Garrett had a reputation for being a liar and a cheat, so I did not pursue it too hard." "Why are you here now?" Lucas asked quietly. The old marshal smiled. "Because I wanted to tell you that the case is officially closed. Garrett died last year back in New York, apparently drank himself to death. His brothers are all either dead or in prison for various crimes. There is nobody left who cares about what happened to 5 hired guns in a blizzard 13 years ago." He stood up and set his coffee cup on the table. "I also wanted to tell you that sometimes the law cannot protect good people from bad ones. And when that happens, good people have to protect themselves. I do not know what happened that day in the snow, and I do not need to know. But I see what you have built here, see the family you have, and I figure justice worked out just fine in the end." He tipped his hat to Anna and walked to the door. Then he paused and looked back at Lucas. "You did right," he said simply. "Whatever happened, you did right." After the marshal left, Anna went to Lucas and wrapped her arms around him. He held her tightly, and she felt some of the tension he had been carrying for 13 years finally drain away. "It is over," she whispered. "It is really over." "Yes," Lucas said. He kissed the top of her head. "It is over." That night, after the children were asleep, Lucas and Anna sat on the porch and watched the stars wheel overhead. The night was clear and cool, filled with the sounds of crickets and the distant call of an owl. "You ever regret it?" Lucas asked quietly. "Coming here, staying with me, all of it?" Anna looked at him in surprise. "Regret it? Lucas, you saved my life. You gave me everything I ever wanted. How could I possibly regret any of it?" "I killed 5 men," Lucas said. His voice was flat, emotionless, but Anna knew him well enough to hear the pain underneath. "I killed them for you, and I would do it again without hesitation. But sometimes I wonder if you look at me and see a killer." Anna took his face in her hands and made him look at her. "I look at you and see the man I love. The man who risks his life every day working this ranch to provide for our family. The man who reads bedtime stories to our children and teaches them right from wrong. The man who holds me every night and makes me feel safe and cherished. That is what I see when I look at you." She kissed him softly, then said, "Those men came to hurt me, to take me against my will. You stopped them. You protected me. There is no shame in that, no guilt. You are a good man, Lucas Zimmerman, and I am grateful every single day that I stumbled to your door in that blizzard." Lucas pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. "I love you," he said roughly. "I loved you from the first moment I saw you standing in the snow, half frozen and terrified but still fighting. I knew right then that I would do anything to keep you safe. And I love you," Anna said. "I will love you until the day I die and beyond." They sat together on the porch until late into the night, holding each other and talking about everything and nothing. They talked about the ranch, about the children, about their dreams for the future. They talked about the past, about the long road that had led them both to that cabin in the mountains, to each other, to this life they had built together. The years continued to roll by in their steady rhythm. The children grew into young adults, each one finding their own path. James stayed on the ranch, working alongside his father and eventually taking over much of the day-to-day operations. He married a sweet-natured girl from Lone Pine and gave Lucas and Anna their first grandchildren. Elizabeth went to San Francisco to attend a school for young ladies, much to her mother's anxiety and her father's pride. She became a teacher and eventually returned to the area, opening a small school in Lone Pine and filling it with children eager to learn. She married a doctor, a kind man who shared her passion for education and helping others. Thomas was the adventurous one, as they had always known he would be. He left home at 18 to see the world, worked as a cowboy on various ranches across the West, and eventually became a guide for wealthy Easterners who wanted to experience the frontier. He wrote long letters home describing his adventures, and every year or two he would show up at the ranch unannounced, full of stories and laughter. Lucas and Anna grew older together gracefully. Lucas's dark hair turned silver, and lines appeared around his eyes and mouth, but to Anna he was as handsome at 50 as he had been at 30. She went gray too, softer around the middle from bearing and raising 3 children, but Lucas still looked at her with the same love and desire that he always had. They both slowed down as the years passed, letting James take over more of the ranch work. But they were still active, still engaged with life. Lucas taught his grandchildren to ride and rope, just as he had taught his own children. Anna continued her garden and her preserving, and the whole family gathered at the ranch every Sunday for a meal and fellowship. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Lucas took Anna on a trip to San Francisco. It was the first time either of them had been to a real city, and they marveled at the crowds, the buildings, the sheer energy of urban life. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in restaurants, saw a play at the theater. It was exciting and overwhelming and wonderful, but after a week, they were both ready to go home to the peace and quiet of their mountain ranch. On the train ride back, Anna rested her head on Lucas's shoulder and said, "Thank you for this. It was wonderful, but I realized something while we were there." "What is that?" Lucas asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Home is not a place," Anna said. It is wherever you are. That cabin where you took me in during the blizzard, the house we built together, even this train car right now. Anywhere with you is home." Lucas kissed her forehead. "I feel the same way. From the moment you knocked on my door, you became my home." They arrived back at the ranch to find that James and his wife had organized a surprise party. All their friends and neighbors were there. Elizabeth and her husband had come from Lone Pine, and even Thomas had shown up, having planned his visit to coincide with the anniversary. There was food and music and dancing, and Anna and Lucas were surrounded by love and laughter. Late that night, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Lucas and Anna walked out to the meadow behind the house. The moon was full and bright, turning the grass silver and casting deep shadows beneath the pine trees. They stood together in the moonlight, holding hands like young lovers. "You remember the night I asked you to marry me?" Lucas asked. "Of course," Anna said. "Right here in this meadow, with the wildflowers blooming all around us." "I was so nervous," Lucas admitted with a smile. "I had been trying to work up the courage for weeks. I kept thinking you would say no, that you would realize you could do better than a cowboy living in a cabin in the middle of nowhere." "I never thought that for a moment," Anna said firmly. "You were everything I ever wanted. You still are." Lucas turned to face her, took both her hands in his. 20 years, he said softly. 20 years of marriage, and I love you more now than I did on our wedding day. I did not know that was possible, but it is. Every day with you is a gift." Anna felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you too. You saved me, Lucas. Not just from those men in the blizzard, but from a life of fear and loneliness. You gave me love and safety and a family. You gave me everything." They kissed in the moonlight, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a life more beautiful than either could have imagined. The wind whispered through the pine trees, carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote sang to the moon. The years continued their inexorable march forward. Lucas and Anna both lived to see their grandchildren grow, and even welcomed a few great-grandchildren into the world. The ranch continued to thrive under James's management, and the family name became respected throughout the region. Lucas died on a spring morning when he was 72 years old. He had been working with a young horse in the corral, patiently teaching it to accept a saddle, when his heart simply gave out. James found him sitting peacefully against the fence post, a slight smile on his face, as if he had just laid down for a brief rest. The horse stood quietly nearby, as if keeping watch. Anna was devastated by his loss, but she did not fall apart. Lucas had taught her to be strong, to face whatever life brought with courage and grace. She continued to live in the house they had built together, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She tended her garden, read her books, and told stories about Lucas to anyone who would listen. She lived for 5 more years, and on a warm summer evening, she passed away peacefully in her sleep. Her children found her in the morning, lying in the bed she had shared with Lucas for so many years, with a peaceful expression on her face, and her hand stretched out to the empty space beside her, as if reaching for someone who had come to take her home. They buried her next to Lucas in the family cemetery on a hillside overlooking the ranch. The whole community turned out for the funeral, and person after person stood up to share stories about Anna and Lucas, about their kindness and generosity, about the love that had been so evident between them. James, now a gray-haired man himself, stood at his mother's graveside and spoke the final words. "My parents met in a blizzard," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. 8 men were after my mother, and my father shot 5 of them to protect her. The rest never came back. It sounds like a violent story, a dark beginning, But what came after was love. Pure, steadfast, enduring love. They built a life together that blessed everyone who knew them. They raised us to be kind and strong and true. They showed us what real love looks like, the kind that weathers every storm and only grows stronger with time. He paused, looking out over the assembled crowd. They are together now, wherever souls go when they leave this earth. Together, just as they always were. And the love they shared lives on in all of us. The mourners drifted away gradually, leaving flowers on the graves and tears on the ground. But as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, a sense of peace settled over the hillside. Two people who had found each other in the most desperate of circumstances had lived a full and beautiful life together. They had faced danger and hardship and the normal challenges of life, and they had overcome it all with love and courage and unwavering devotion to each other. The ranch continued for generations, passed down from parent to child, each one adding their own chapter to the family story. But it all began with a blizzard, 8 men, 5 shots, and 2 people who found love when they needed it most. Their story became legend in the region, told and retold around campfires and dinner tables, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope and love can prevail. And sometimes, on cold winter nights when the snow fell thick and fast over the Sierra Nevada, people swore they could see 2 figures walking hand in hand through the meadows. A tall man and a woman with dark curls, forever young, forever in love, forever home.